Hey everyone, thanks for taking part in this do it at your own pace tasting with the Kensington Wine Market team. I have my colleagues Evan Eckersley and Harmony Pollock here. My name is Andrew Ferguson. I am one of the long-suffering Scotch experts at Kensington Wine Market, and we've got a cool tasting to take you through. We know not everybody can tune in and do tastings when we want to host them or when it's convenient to host them. And you know, some things should live beyond just one night. So we thought it would be fun to create a little product where you can taste some of the things that makes our shop exceptional and unique at your own pace and on your own schedule. So Harmony, Evan, and I are here. We've got 6 Kensington Wine Market casks that we're going to walk you through, from Bruichladdich, Clynelish, Glenfarclas, Tomatin, Compass Box, so not strictly a cask, but we'll get to that when we get there, and Tobermory. And a couple things here. Don't think, well, I would suggest it's probably not best to drink all 6 ounces all on your own in one night. If for no other reason than that, most of these whiskeys are well into the 50s, and one of them is a whopping 64.8%. So yeah, maybe pour half the glass out if you're doing this on your own, or if you're sharing with a friend, split them up. You're still going to get about a half an ounce of each. I think it makes sense to have some water on the side, which I've got here. My trusty pipette is somewhere. I'll find it once someone else starts talking. But we will go back through the whiskeys as well too. So we're going to go through them. We're going to tell you about the distillery. We're going to tell you about the bottling. We're going to taste it together as a group. And then once we've gone through the range, we're going to go back one more time, because your sense of taste can change and evolve through a tasting. And some things that you maybe find you don't like at the start, when you come back to them, you might find you have a new appreciation for them. And they change. That's the cool thing about whiskey. It oxidizes in glass, it evolves, it changes. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Evan, and I'll give you guys a turn. Evan, anything you want to add to that before we get started here?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty cool, well, it's a pretty cool range, if nothing else, but I think it also will hopefully give you guys that are watching an idea of what Kensington Wine Market is all about, if you're not already aware. Just about everything in the lineup of these 6 different whiskeys is bottled at cask strength or high strength, if nothing else. The lowest alcohol is 49. The highest alcohol, as Andrew said, is 64.8. And whenever possible, when we are selecting casks or selecting something that's going to be bottled with our label on it, which all these are, we want it at higher strength or at cask strength if we can get it, because we like our whiskey to be at that ourselves, so that we can choose how we're going to drink it, whether it's neat on its own or with water or with ice or what have you. And we also like our customers that purchase the bottle to be able to make that same choice. When doing a tasting like this, we always recommend that you do taste it as is, neat first. That's going to give you an idea of what you think of the whiskey, and kind of put you on even terms with everybody else that's tasting it as well. We're all tasting sort of the same liquid at the same time. And then once you've taken that first taste, that'll also give you an idea of what you think it needs, if it needs anything, whether it's a few drops of water or whether it drinks just as well on its own at 64.8% as it may be. But we'll see how that goes as we go along.
Okay. Harmony, do we miss anything?
I don't think so. I guess I'd just like to touch that if you are not drinking these at home and you do intend on consuming all 6 of these at once, get home safely, take an Uber, taxi, don't drink and drive, and drink responsibly.
Yeah. Also take notes so you can remember what you did taste the day after.
Right.
For sure, yes, take
notes. Real bad. And also, Harmony, maybe there's something we can address here for a moment. We don't talk about this enough, but like, is it true that whiskey is a man's drink?
No, I think not. I am a woman and I love whiskey. It was the first spirit I ever tasted, and I absolutely love it. It brought me down this dark rabbit hole. 12 years later, still in the industry working in whiskey. So no, I would say it's definitely not a man's drink. And if you actually know anything about whiskey, most whiskey out there has a lot of women behind the team, women on the blending team, women distillers, women like female marketers. And a lot of women are making headway for sure, becoming the first in their, in whatever lane that they're in. But there's a lot of females in the industry, and they have been for a very long time. Even historically, they were, you can look it up, and women were making whiskey at home just to keep their men home. So keep them out of the bars and out of trouble. So they started making beer and other spirits. So I think we've come a long way, but marketing is what it is, but definitely not a man's drink.
Well said, and very diplomatic, because I kind of put you on the spot with that one. But partly the reason we did it, and I know we got to get rolling into this tasting, is because every once in a while we'll get a caller who wants help with whiskey and for some reason thinks that he needs to speak to a man. So don't be that guy. Harmony's got great advice, better than most men by a long shot. So yeah,
there are times when that happens where Harmony has to pass that on to somebody that doesn't know whiskey as well as she does, and then just whisper in their ear what they're supposed to say. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, but anyway, all right. Enough about that. Let's talk whiskey. We've got our first whiskey tonight, which is the Bruichladdich 2010 10-year-old. This is a cask bottled for our shop. It's our third cask from a first fill bourbon barrel, 58.8%. Evan's going to pop it up on the screen, but there it is for right now. This is a funny cask for us because it's actually not the one we chose. We chose a cask, a first fill bourbon cask that we're really in love with. And accidentally in the bottling hall, it got mixed with another cask, which meant it was no longer a single cask. It was a vatting, and an accidental, not a planned vatting at that. So they offered us another cask, and it's Bruichladdich. So I mean, how bad can it be? Especially first fill bourbon. So we've got a kind of what I think is like classic cheesy, funky Islay Bruichladdich here. So Harmony, what are you getting on this one?
Big cheese, like big, like wet hay, doughy, cheesy, outdoors in the rain kind of smell.
Yeah, I agree. This is definitely that Bruichladdich lactic note, which probably doesn't get as much talk as it should in some cases. It's something that seems to go straight through their entire lineup into the Port Charlottes and sometimes even into the Octomores for their heavily peated stuff. But seeing it without peat like this, you really get that sort of farm plus lactic and cheesy note, as Harmony says. I totally agree.
Yeah, tons of barley on it, which it's a young whiskey, so that's not too surprising. But also the way they make whiskey at Bruichladdich, it's not a surprise that you're getting that real big impact from the barley. But quite coastal too, like there's a saltiness to it. There's a bit of brine in there as well. This is a distillery that's located right next to the ocean on an island that gets battered by the Atlantic. So the air is saturated with salt. So you're seeing some of that in there too. And I remember when we did the Bruichladdich tasting with this in the fall, Kurt and I were chatting about this one, and I'd mentioned that it reminds me a bit of Loch and Dal, which is a style of Bruichladdich that they haven't really made a lot of. They made some, and there's been a handful of bottlings of it, but I've always found it to be way more lactic even than your typical Bruichladdich are. But we haven't seen as much of it lately.
Yeah, this is sort of that clean and pristine style of Bruichladdich that I really like. We've talked about the funkiness, but that C note and the coastal sort of saline and brine that comes through really cleans out your nose and even your palate upon tasting in a really nice way. Leaves some really nice fruit notes. The barley sings on this, and I think it says on the bottle there's 3 different strains in there, which is interesting as well. I think it doesn't say from single farm, but the cool thing about Bruichladdich is how it does talk about the provenance and what goes into the glass that you've got in your hands.
So we've got Publican, Oxbridge, and Optic malts here. And who knows, maybe the malt bins were getting low, so they married what was left together to do a mash. They're not really entirely sure how much was in there. One of the things that's kind of cool about Bruichladdich, they obviously have always wanted to push that sort of terroir concept on it. Is that you can kind of get a bit of a minerality to it, a bit of a flintiness to it, possibly traces coming from the soil. And as you're saying, Evan, the fruitiness, like I get like little bright berry fruits, like you know when you buy those packs of frozen berries, like mixed frozen berries, like if you're going to make a a smoothie or something. It reminds me of that.
And on the white fruit side of things, there's a lot of peaches and cream going on in there for me as well.
Mhm.
Yeah,
How
I'm
about you,
definitely
Harmony?
getting the peaches and apricots for me, a little bit more on the stone fruit with like a nice
Mhm.
crisp apple note. And
Mhm.
something on just the cleansing of the palate. It's not overpoweringly floral, it's not overpoweringly menthol or eucalyptus, but there's like a freshness there on the
Yeah.
palate. As everything dries up and kind of becomes salty, there's like a hint of floral mintiness for me.
Yeah. The palate, very creamy, as you said. There's a nice floral character there, loads of barley. It's gravelly. There's again that sort of wet slate minerality, salt, and even some like nice icing sugar notes. And I agree, the stone
Yeah.
fruit,
Yeah.
apples, peaches, maybe a bit of dried apricot as well.
So all three of us have tasted this dram before, of course. But for you guys, Harmony and Andrew, water or no water for this one typically?
I'm adding a little bit because I don't remember what water does to it. But
Mhm.
while we're on that subject, it's no secret. I am a water skeptic. I find most of the time it does not improve my whiskey for me. And the important thing there is like to not let anyone else tell you how you should do it. There's nothing wrong
Mhm.
with adding water, but you need to acknowledge that it's going to change the whiskey. There's an exothermic reaction that happens when you add water, and there's a release of heat, but also there's changes that are made in it. And the question is whether you're going to like it better or not without water. And as you guys both well know, when people say water opens whiskey up, it's a bit of a trigger word for me.
Mhm.
Harmony,
No,
what are your
it's
thoughts on water while we're there?
I like to kind of be a little sneaky when it comes to water. I may not add it to the initial dram, but I might build up some saliva on
Mhm.
my palate to mix, kind of chew it in at the same time if I feel like that first approach came in a little hot and spicy. But yeah, I tend to rely on my own palate to dilute if I need it. But I'm not afraid to add water, but it's definitely not my first thought.
You know what? That's a really good call, and that's maybe something we should talk about on the second dram here is sort of how to approach nosing and tasting a whiskey, because rolling it around on your palate and rolling around on your tongue, not just to dilute, but also to get your palate acclimated to it, can be very important, especially for that first sip.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're going from 0 to 58.8%. So for most people, that's going to be a bit of a shock to your palate.
Yeah.
Even for me, like I'm finding, and I'm actually curiously finding this whiskey warmer. I'm noticing the alcohol more after having added water to it than I did before. So
Yeah, I definitely did. I also noticed that saltiness came out quite a bit more, that lactate note kind of toned down,
Mhm.
but the fruitiness and that coastal minerality really came through, like I'm sucking on a pebble on the finish.
Yeah. Well, even the floral note that was in there almost went into a spicy floral for me in a cool manner with a bit of water there. And it is interesting, like water will do different things to different whiskeys, where I've had whiskeys where water actually made it seem drier on the palate, which isn't what you would necessarily expect, but it can definitely bring out some interesting notes that you weren't necessarily expecting.
Yeah.
well,
And-
Evan, to this one, I would suggest that this one feels drier having added
Mhm.
water.
I agree.
I would agree. And I would just like to say, for those new to drinking, when we're talking about adding water, we're literally at this moment just talking about 2 to 3 drops at a time, maybe a couple drops more, nothing more than half a teaspoon at a time when you're just talking about opening up a whiskey. But every whiskey is different, and every person is different, but we're just talking about adding a couple drops to this
Mhm.
little pour. I personally only poured about half my sample bottle in, so I only added about 3 drops.
Mhm.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Harmony, I noticed you tried to trigger me there by using the word open up. I caught that. All right. Should we move on to the second whiskey? Or did
Yeah.
Evan, did you share the screen? I can't remember what we did here.
I did, and I'll share it after you show the bottle on each one if I
Right,
recall,
perfect.
remember to.
All right, so we're moving on to the boutique whiskey company, Clynelish. Now, this does not say Clynelish anywhere on the bottle, and we'll get to that in a moment. But more importantly is the actual image that's on the label there. Now, unfortunately, we selected this whiskey just before Harmony joined our team. Otherwise, she would be on the label as well too. Evan's going to zoom in on that for you. Basically, we were offered a cask from Clynelish, which is a distillery in the Northern Highlands of Scotland. And very close to the Clynelish distillery is a monument to one of the villains of Scottish history, the Duke of Sutherland, on his death after evicting tens of thousands of people from his land to make way for sheep, including my mom's ancestors who found their way to Nova Scotia. When he died, he had a monument put up telling people how great he was and how he looked out for the poor and the orphans and the less well-off and widows and all this nonsense, which is totally not true. He was a complete asshole. Anyway, I had this idea because we couldn't tell people this whiskey was from Clynelish, but we could hint at where it's from. And the cat in the clouds is the hint of where it's from, because that's the symbol for Clynelish. But a bit more blatantly, this monument in Golspie, which is not far from the town of Brora, where Clynelish was established, this monument is kind of dominant. It dominates the landscape, and Clynelish is the closest distillery to it. But also, the Duke of Sutherland founded the Clynelish distillery. One of the versions of the story I heard was that it was to drive the last handful of bootleggers out of business that were still squatting on his lands, which, if you think about it, is kind of a cruel, thing to do when you've already kicked people off your land. You're going to do whatever it takes to completely get rid of them. The cleaned up version of this over the decades that followed was that he did it to provide jobs to people. But anyone who knows anything about whiskey knows that you can't employ tens of thousands of people at one distillery. So it's a little rich, but there's lots of little nuggets in there. My friend Sam Simmons from that boutique whiskey company are on the label, because way back in 2006, we both climbed up Ben Bragg, where that monument is located, and urinated on the Duke of Sutherland's monument. So this is our monument desecration or monument urination bottling, which I'm quite proud of. And then in the balloon, you've got who have we got there? We've got Kurt, Sean, Keith, and Evan. There's a candle powering the balloon because Clynelish is a very waxy profile. There's a ship on its way to Canada, sheep down in the valley floor, and Keith, who used to work with us, who is a bit of a beefcake and a personal trainer, wasn't happy with how his arm looked. He thought it looked too skinny. So we did as we do. We had them Bugs Bunny his arm and make it look even wobblier. So we had a little bit of fun with that. But that's kind of what that boutique whiskey company is about. Their labels are playful. They tell a story. And with this whiskey, I really wanted it to tell a story. And I hope you guys dig it. But Evan, I'll start with you this time. What do you get on the nose for this?
Yeah, so I'll talk a bit about sort of my version of nosing and tasting, and you guys can add your comments in as we go along too. But so we probably should have talked about this first dram in, but this is Kensington Wine Market, so we figure out a way to get all the information there, but it's not necessarily in the order you'd want it in. So first thing you're going to want to do is just give it a nose. 50% alcohol, 51% alcohol on this. We've already done 58.8, so you can stick your nose sort of in the glass if you need to. If you find it's too hot and sort of too alcohol driven, then you can pull your nose back and give it a lighter sniff. But for those of us that are really used to it, our nose tends to go right in the glass as we're going along. Second step after that is to give it a small sip, let that roll around in your tongue, and let your tongue and palate get kind of acclimated to the whiskey itself.
Yeah, and that first sip is a bit of a palate cleanser too.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether it's because you're transitioning from one whiskey to the next, or if you're going from coffee, beer, dinner, a cigarette, or something into the whiskey, that first one's really going to help kind of cleanse and clean up your palate too.
Absolutely. So, and after you've tasted it, what you'll see a lot of people do is they're almost chewing the whiskey. And you actually hear about this in bourbon, the Kentucky chew, and everybody has their own term for it all around the world. But it's almost like you're just smacking your tongue against the top of the roof of your mouth and smacking your lips a few times, just to kind of bring in a bit of oxygen. And a lot of what you're going to actually get aroma wise is going to happen with the taste as well, where it's going to sort of back up what you've already nosed and also add to the actual flavor that you're getting off your tongue as well. So this one to me does have some floral notes. It does go a little bit lactic like the Bruichladdich as well, but it's more into like a really creamy yogurt territory, or even whipped cream, maybe even a bit of lemon curd in there. Still has some really nice floral notes, like going into vanilla flowers, and just some nice either dunnage or maybe just a hint of peat in there. Could be all in my head.
Okay, Harmony, thoughts?
It's really doughy on like a Play-Doh sort of platform for me, like homemade Play-Doh, very salty, very doughy.
What color?
Green.
Nice.
Yeah. Very nice though, and definitely floral. I get a lot of floral notes on there. Can't specifically pick one, maybe like a little bit more of like a dried potpourri sort of note, versus
Maybe
like a
some,
fresh,
maybe some heather.
maybe some heather. Yeah.
From Northern Highlands.
Yeah. But I definitely, I don't know if I'm getting peat, but definitely some dunnage or some sort of old smell. It smells old.
Yeah, it does.
This is a musty, funky whiskey, like 100%.
Yeah.
It has a little bit of that waxy profile that Clynelish is famous for. But rather than being like a really sort of drippy candle wax, it's more of like wax sheets or like parchment, like a parchment paper kind of waxiness to it.
And even on the palate, it gets a little bit of the fruitiness of like a waxy sort of like gummy worm or something like that in there.
And for me, it reminds me, there's a Scottish dessert called Cranachan, which is like kind of oatmeal, like berry fruits. I don't know if it's cream or like vanilla icing that they or vanilla ice cream that they kind of mix into it, but it kind of reminds me of that. It's got that sort of berry fruit flavor, that sort of maltiness coming from like that oatmeal note as well too.
Yeah.
So Cranachan's no relation to Heineken then, stylistically.
It's an ocean apart, quite literally, or a sea. It's not quite an ocean; it's a sea apart.
But yeah, so your notes are very similar. Like your tasting notes, Evan, being kind of like fruity and kind of creamy yogurty, and then he says it's like a fruit compote with like oats and cream. It's like yogurt, maybe.
Yeah,
ice cream yogurt.
Yogurt, yeah.
You
well,
know
that the oat note is a good call. That sort of like creamy graininess that comes along with it.
Definitely. It doesn't have like that sweet barley note that the Bruichladdich had, but so the oats is a good note to have. I think kind of separate them a little bit more.
Yeah, and part of that, the barley note not being there in the same manner, it could be just the difference in distillery, but it also could be the Clynelish being about twice the age of the Bruichladdich as well, where some of those fresh barley notes have blown off with time in the cask.
Absolutely, and it does have that kind of like oak tannin finish to it that the first one didn't have as much of, which is really nice. Like you definitely get that like honey and leathery oak without going like over the top in the leather like some products can. But yeah, really enjoyable, really nice.
Did you guys add water to it this time around? I just added a few drops just for kicks.
Yeah, I'm getting more root vegetables with water, like some carrots and turnips. I don't know, maybe some rutabaga.
Actually, now that you say it, it's almost like, you know, those that bag of root vegetable chips that you can get where they've got the beet ones and that. It's got a little bit of that on the nose.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. It goes like reminds me a bit of some of those classic ryes, Evan, that we've tasted in some of our tastings. Very cool.
All right. Shall we on to the next whiskey?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, if we're moving too fast for you, feel free to pause it, because as we said, you're doing this at your own pace. This is your own tasting. And Evan, we didn't really talk, or Harmony for that matter, about glasses. I have a suspicion both of you are probably tasting from Glencairn glasses tonight.
Yep.
I'm rocking Capita glasses just for fun.
Cool.
And I busted out for this next one the old school blender's glass because
Oh, very cool.
it occurred to me that for a couple of these whiskeys, the Glenfarclas and the Compass Box, I wanted to kind of really amp up the noses on these just to see what they do. Because the Glenfarclas that we're going to next, even though it's sherry cask, it's quite delicate. There's a great story behind this whiskey, but we won't spend too much time on that because, well, if I told the full genesis of this bottling, it could take like 10 minutes. But it's got yours truly. I don't know if I can get that to actually focus. And George Grant, formerly of Glenfarclas on the label there. We were both made keepers of the Quake way back in 2011. So this is kind of commemorating that. That's Blair Castle on the label. It is it the fourth or the fifth Ego Series bottling? I think it's the fourth, right?
Yeah, it's the fourth.
And as far as we know, the final. Apparently they're taking a slight change in how they do things for these type of bottlings. So it's not a never say never scenario, but they did seem quite keen about putting the new store dog on their Walter. So you never know. You might see a Glenfarclas with Walter on there at some point. But this is not a single cask whiskey. This is a cask strength bottling done for our shop. Roughly 450 bottles at cask strength, or not at cask strength, as opposed to 43%, which is the typical bottling strength for Glenfarclas. And there are some parallels here to what you get in your standard 21, keeping in mind that all these distillery bottlings, if they're, whether it's a 10, 12, 15, 20, 21, 30 year, they're going to change over time because they can't perfectly replicate the recipe each time, but some distilleries get closer than others. I get a little bit of drift in the Glenfarclas bottlings, especially the 21. And I think that's kind of cool. Like it's changing a little bit over time. If it's good and in that same general style portfolio, I think that's great. But for me, the big note that I get often is like blueberry pie on Glenfarclas 21. So we'll see if we get that here. But Harmony, we'll start with you this time. What do you get on the nose for this?
Well, the power of suggestion is some blueberry pie on here. But it's definitely more like berry driven and red fruit driven than the last two. And I think that comes down to the cask. And if you're not familiar with how Scotch is aged, the cask plays a big part. And the first two whiskeys that we tried were aged in ex-bourbon barrels, where this one is in ex-sherry. And that can be a bit confusing when you're reading a label. It says sherry mature, and you're like, thought I was buying Scotch. Is this wine? It is not wine. It's a Scotch aged in ex-wine barrels, but it plays a very big role in how it's going to finish and turn out.
Harmony, it's funny you say that because when you're especially talking to people buying whiskey as a gift for people who don't know it, and you explain that it's from a bourbon cask, they're like, no, I want a Scotch.
Yeah.
Like, hold on a second here. Let's just slow this down.
And it's even more confusing when it has three types of wood finish. It's bourbon, port, and sherry, or bourbon, port, and Madeira. And it's like, well, how many different languages can they fit on this label?
Yeah, you got to be careful and always put in the X on that, because we all know that the X's have a vast influence on us even after we're done with them, and that's kind of the way X barrels, X bourbon, and X sherry casks are with Scotch whiskey.
All right, Evan, pinning you down on the nose here. What are you getting?
Yeah, I think the blueberry note's a really good one. I would say going into those Brookside chocolate blueberry type deals, get a lot of that along with the blueberry pie, but also into like a Welch's red grape juice in there as well, and a touch of cherry in there, but it's full on the red and dark fruits, and going into some of those dried fruit territory notes that you get into older Glenfarclas as well, such as dates and prunes and so on and so forth.
I also get a little bit of that bubblegum tape note on the nose.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Good call.
So this might be somewhere between where you guys are at then. Like I was getting those like acai berries, but like the chocolate dipped acai berries, which have made an appearance in our house recently, but also Turkish Delight. I was getting a little bit of Turkish Delight here too. Or if you want to class it down a little bit, Big Turk.
There you go. Yeah, or eat more. Pretty close to the same.
Yeah, the Big Turk though, I think didn't the Big Turk have like a jelly interior? Like cheap milk chocolate surrounding like, I don't know, grapey jelly.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds about right. So there's on the palate, this still has a lot of the dried fruits, but you're getting into more of a fruit leather and actual leather territory where there's a little bit of dryness, but that really concentrated sort of pressed down dried fruit along with it.
Yeah.
So for me, and it could be the glass here because again I'm operating on a slightly different glass. For me, this is starting to go really tropical. So I'm getting those dried fruits. I'm getting the leather, the chocolate, raisins, dates, figs, that kind of stuff. But then underneath that, I'm starting to get like mango, papaya. I mean, this is not a super dark whiskey. It's kind of pale, classic refill sherry style. I don't think there's a high proportion of first fill here. And I know historically the 21 versus the 25 Glenfarclas typically was less heavily sherried. So you've got a cask there with opportunity for oxidation. And I think for me, that's what I'm starting to get here is sherry notes, but with subtler tropical fruit notes underneath.
I would agree with you on that. I find the palate, especially a couple sips in, a lot more tame than the nose as far as like the dark fruits and the blueberries. It's a lot more melon and kiwi, and brighter tropical notes. It's really lovely.
Yeah. More white grape juice than red grape juice, and maybe even a bit of apple juice in there.
Now, I'm always reluctant to add water to sherry cask whiskeys, call it superstition. But as you've said, Evan, we've got more of this to play with. And if you haven't poured your full sample, adding water to it's not going to do any harm because you can add a little bit more whiskey to it to bring it back up. But just to see what happens with it. And I'm curious to see what you guys think if you've added any water to this one yet.
Oh, it's spicier.
Yeah, it does go spicy, not quite into stringent territory, but the wine notes are coming out a bit more from the sherry.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit more like acidic, spicy, even oaky. Yeah.
It's a little more flabby to me with water. Like it's kind of musty dunnage tones, leather, nutty tones, chocolate. Tropical fruits are still there. It's very drinkable with a drop of water in there, but I don't think I like the overall structure of it as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's as Andrew mentioned, it's a little bit more of the roll of the dice sometimes with certain whiskeys, especially out of ex-sherry or wine casks, or I find even when you're having a whiskey that's been finished in multiple casks, what water is going to do to the whiskey. Always worth a try, but again, be sparing and have backup if you need to have another dram after that, I guess.
Okay. Well,
nosing whiskey has always been my favorite part. And I know some people think that's crazy. Drinking it is my favorite part, but I love nosing whiskey. And I know we're only halfway through a lot of great whiskeys to go, but just nosing back the glasses already, that Bruichladdich has completely changed. And it's like grape Kool-Aid or something. It's like,
I was going to say that going back to that Bruichladdich now is it's a mix of like going into a fudgery and a soap shop. So if you went into a hybrid fudgery / soap shop,
like Banff.
You just walked into Banff.
In Banff.
Just walk down the street in Banff, basically.
I'll kind of meet you guys in the middle there. I'm getting full on peanut brittle right on the nose right now for me.
Interesting.
Now, the Clynelish is like Ruffles sour cream and onion chips right now.
Oh yeah, that's a good call.
I was gonna say that herb and spice dip.
Yeah.
Oh, a little, yeah, what do you call that? I know, yeah, the one in the box with the little tin wrapper around it.
Yeah, yeah.
Boursin, a little Boursin.
Yeah.
There
It's
we
like
go.
it should come with a free Chai Bond t-shirt or something like that right now.
For
Well,
sure, yeah. So
very
that's
cool.
just, just an example, I guess, of like just a little time in the glass, right?
Mhm.
Mhm. All right,
Absolutely.
let's move on to the Tomatin. I think this is our third cask of Tomatin, 2006. Single cask, French oak, presumably a Finnish French oak hogshead, 57.3. Although it does say, to be fair, on the label, matured in. So possibly full term French oak hoggy. We don't know. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. 288 total bottles. Tomatin is a distillery in the Highlands, just south of Inverness. It's a distillery that I know there's definitely fans of in the shop. Not, among your most well-known distilleries, but often a company that's putting really good quality whiskey out there at a great
Mhm.
price. And Evan, I'm going to start with you again this time. I'm going to switch over. What are your thoughts on the nose on this to get us rolling?
Yeah, so this was a little bit of a wilder cask than we go for a lot of the time, where it's a French oak hogshead, and that I get the feeling that doesn't tell the entire story about what that cask potentially held beforehand. I'm assuming it's going to be an ex-wine cask, but I could be wrong. Sorry, Andrew, you're muted there.
I was, with good reason, but
Okay, gotcha. But it goes into a really cool apples and cinnamon territory, like where you're getting into like true cinnamon and cinnamon bark on the nose for me right now.
Ooh.
Oh man, I'm getting like poached pear chocolate in
Nice.
cinnamon, like all like flambeing together, pour some
Mhm.
sherry wine on it, and maybe a little banana.
So I'm going to go all Tom Hanks on you here. I'm getting like assorted chocolates. So like a box of chocolates, like different fillings, nut, caramel, fruit, all kinds of stuff. And then Eat More for me. I know we dredged that one up a little earlier, but Eat
Mhm.
More to me is not really classic chocolate. It's more like molasses and nuts and
Mhm.
Yeah.
other stuff.
See, I was thinking different Tom Hanks, and I thought for sure you were going to bring up Wilson for some strange reason.
No, I was going all Forrest Gump on you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Juice
this
Juice
is
as well
all
too.
kinds of fruit and chocolate on the nose.
Yeah, very tea-like on the nose as well, where you're going into almost like just a full-on red rose, just their basic tea that's heavily steeped on there.
The palate on that compared to the last three is just, it's so thick and rich.
Mhm.
Really coating. True to French oak style, there's an enormous amount of spice there. Like this is a
Yeah,
really
tons.
rich, spicy whiskey, caramel,
Mm.
nutty tones, really more back towards that Eat More flavor. And there's some fruit in there, but I'm thinking like kind of cooked cherries or like cooked raisins.
Mhm.
Flavors.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
hot chocolate through a straw that you made out of a Twizzler, where you get those red fruit notes in, and that cinnamon and that mocha-esque note all at the same time.
Definitely, but you also get some of those like cinnamon candy, like spicy ginger notes as well,
Yeah.
like dried
Yeah, ginger for
ginger
sure.
almost. Really, really loving this cask. I love the body on this, and it's something you would, like eat a bowl of vanilla ice cream with.
Oh yeah, it would totally fit the bill for something like that, just to give you something that's a little bit more spicy over the sweet.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I've added a bit of water to mine just to see what happens, because I am finding that is hella spicy. I mean, in a good way. This is a whiskey where I think it was one of the ones we forgot we'd ordered because it took so long to get to us. But it also arrived during the great cask delivery of mid 2022, where like 13, 14 casks showed up all one after the other. And it kind of got lost in that. But I think this is a style of whiskey that would appeal to people that like sherry cask whiskeys and like bold sherry cask whiskeys. And no, it doesn't have the color, and it's not quite as it doesn't have that same dried fruit, oloroso, nutty profile that some people are looking for. But I think in terms of the body, the overall flavor profile, this is something that would appeal to that kind of audience.
Definitely. I think at Tomatin, if I'm not mistaken, Alberta is their largest retail platform. They sell more Tomatin in Alberta than anywhere else in the world. And I think that warmth and spiciness is something that we as cold Canadians can get behind, especially this time of year.
I wonder if that might have something to do with us shifting a couple of pallets of Tomatin contrast for them.
Very well could be.
Yeah,
Or that
I'm sure.
I was going to say, or that Tomatin 1988, the year before.
That's right. So how is water with this guy for you guys?
I didn't add water. I'm quite happy with this on its own, and I didn't pour that much. So
I've jumped ahead to experiment for people. I find it gets a little bit more buttery, more doughy with water. It's reminding me of like baked Christmas cookies right out of the oven.
Yeah, it does get this sort of like those ginger notes kind of combined with molasses in a cool way to get your more of a gingerbread note there. There's almost like a rum meets tequila note that is really intriguing in there on the palate for me when you add a bit of water as well.
Yeah. It's a tasty whiskey. It's got a really long finish, really clinging to my palate, warming, spicy. That's an interesting dram. All right.
Yep.
Compass box time.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Evan's pulling that up. This is our second bespoke blend from Compass Box. We've had a bunch of smaller Marion cask products that we've done with them over the years, but this one was done for our 30th anniversary to celebrate 30 years in business. Quite an honor to have our own Compass Box bottling. And the first time around, there was some squiggly lines and it looked kind of cool, but really it didn't look like a lot. This time around, they asked what we wanted on the label. And I said, well, we're based in Calgary. Calgary is a huge part of our identity. So let's do an homage to Calgary. Now, a bit of artistic license taken here. Anyone who's been to Calgary knows that unlike Denver, the mountains don't rise quite as dramatically behind us as they do in this image. But you're getting a little bit of stuff in there. You're getting the Bow Building, you've got the Calgary Tower, and you've got one of the Bankers Hall towers and some other random buildings in there too.
Yeah.
With some big mountains behind them because Calgary's at the edge of the Rocky Mountains. More importantly, I think, is the blend itself. What's cool about this bottling is that it is a blended malt composed of 4 single malts, one of which is 17-year-old Ardbeg. The bulk of the whiskey, if I remember correctly, is 20-year-old Kalila and Clynelish. Does that ring a bell, Evan?
Yeah. 37% of the on the Kalila 20-year-old, 30% on the 20-year-old Clynelish.
And then what's the last component, the 19-year-old one?
And that is 23% 19-year-old Mortlock with 10% 17-year-old Ardbeg.
And as far as we know, the vast majority of this, if not all of it, has come from American oak as well, too.
Yeah, it says ex-bourbon for all those. Yeah.
So, yeah, what does it say? Recharred, first fill, and refill American oak barrels. And I know that, everyone, there's a lot of hype around sherry. There's a lot of hype around color. But if you really want a nice, clean, elegant profile, it's kind of hard to beat bourbon because you have so little risk of getting those off notes in there that can really mask the spirit. And what's cool is that you've got around 10% Ardbeg in here, but you can actually pick it up.
Yeah, you totally can.
The bourbons, those bourbon cask components, the other whiskeys they've blended in are not outshining it. So Harmony, I think it's your turn to lead us off on this one. What do you think about this?
I love this whiskey, Andrew. I remember you and I worked a tasting or an event and it was late. We were the last 2 in the shop and we were finally cleaning up and there was a half heel of this bottle left. And you said, you go ahead, take that home and try it, because you didn't get a chance tonight. So just take that home and give it a try and let me know how you think, what you think of it. And I never told you what I thought of it because I drank it all in one night and I was a little slow the next day. But but I absolutely enjoy this whiskey, so much so that I had it put on the menu at one of my favorite restaurants at Hayden Block so that I can drink it while I'm there. But I love the maltiness. It's so big and full. Coming off the last four, it's definitely Isla on the nose. It's like big and briny and smoky. But underneath all of that, there's this really nice kind of fruitiness, this citrus note that comes kind of dancing through the middle of it all. And then the smoke comes in again with that soft peat, and it's just really, really nice. Just on the nose alone. I haven't even tasted it yet, but I love the nose on this.
Evan?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's such a multifaceted whiskey where, and this is what Compass Box does so well, is the you expect this from a really good blender, and I think they nail it on the head just about every single time, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, where you get the Isla, you get the Mortlock in there, you get the sort of the green grassy notes and the minerality from the Teaninnic, but the Isla notes are so big and robust that you almost expect nothing else in there, but then you get the sweet malt coming through and these nice soft fruit notes coming through as well, and it's just it's magic when it's blended so well like this.
One of the notes that, because we were getting samples back and forth, and I was over at their offices, tried some prototypes of it. And one of the comments that I think was really cool early in the process, or actually towards the end of the process with the final product, they were like, what do you guys think? And, we were talking about it, and Sean's comment was, I think it just needs to be a little bit brighter. And so they amped up a bit of the Teaninnic in first fill bourbon, which I think lifted up the whole blend. The funny story behind all that is, we made this blend, we agreed on the profile of it. They went to the bottling hall, and the bottling hall, this is one of the things that's great about Compass Box. Compass Box will hang on to small portions of projects they worked on before. So the 17-year-old Ardbeg in this is actually from No Name Edition #1. And at that time, it would have been 14 years, but it was left in cask. It kept maturing. Well, they were given a ratio of liquid to pull from 4+ different casks to marry together to create the final blend. And they didn't notice until after this process was done that they were short 20 or 30 liters. So the recipe was wrong. And James Saxon, who's their blender, whose name is on the bottle, his signature's on the bottle as well too. James had to go back and try to figure out what it was that was missing and tweak it by adding whiskey from another cask to get it back to where the blend was supposed to be. And what I just love is that you can get that kind of waxy character from the Teaninnic. You've got that slightly meaty character from the Mortlock that really shows up on the palate. You've got that ashy tropical fruit barbecue kind of note coming from the Ardbeg, and then you've got like that bacony seafood tones coming from the Clynelish. You've got all of those components are in there. I mean, if this was a baking show, they'd be like, you nailed it. You hit all the ingredients you were supposed to have.
Yep, absolutely. No, it's such a wonderful whiskey, and we've been really lucky to have a really good relationship with Compass Box for such a long time, to the point that this is our 30th anniversary blend, and they did do a 25th anniversary blend 5 years ago for us. That was absolutely fantastic as well. And the fact that it's one of those that I love to talk to customers about, because you mentioned Ardbeg in a blend, and they're just like, what? And it's 17 years old. Like it's almost unheard of for something of that caliber, where it sells so well as a single malt to see it in a blend like this. But the fact that they would do that and also do that for us is pretty incredible.
Have either of you added water?
Yeah, it takes the water really, really well. It does tone down a little bit of the briny note for me, at least on the salt side of things. But it keeps the floral note where it's kind of like Parma Violet meets Heather in a really cool manner. And you still get the minerality isn't as tight. It's a little bit softer. You're going into a bit more of a chalky note on the finish. But it keeps the fruit, keeps that really nice malt note in there as well. It holds up really nicely. I think I like it both ways. I prefer it without, but I am not upset that I added water at all.
Harmony?
Yeah, I got a lot more of like a chalky lemon when I add water. And that like it should be a bad note, but it's absolutely not a bad note. That Isla note comes down to like a salty, dirty sock. A little bit more, you know, but it's still good. You still get those fruit notes in the middle, and that meatiness of the Mortlock absolutely shines through still. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. Like you said, it's the perfect recipe for whiskey. I love it.
Yeah. For me with water, lots of salted caramel going towards like creme brulee, and panna cotta. I think it's beautiful, like really elegant. And the smoke's there, like, but the smoke is so delicate, so soft. So there was some rationale to them creating this blend. John, who's been to Calgary a couple times, I've had the pleasure of having him in the shop for events, said that like the whiskey like Calgary is kind of the Wild West meets metropolitan. So like you're more sophisticated, more cosmopolitan elements are your Teaninnick and your Mortlach, and your wild untamed beasts are the Kalila and Ardbeg in the blend. And I think it works really well. So if you're not familiar with Compass Box, check them out. They make great whiskeys. They don't distill whiskeys yet, although rumors are they're going to open a distillery. But they are whiskey makers, and this whiskey is kind of cool. It's one of the highlights of my career in whiskey that we've created not one but two bespoke blends with Compass Box, which not a lot of people can say. So that's pretty awesome. All right, Evan.
Yeah.
Last one.
Tobermory.
Yeah, the Tobermory. And I didn't plan it. I didn't, stagger you guys to start us off on these intentionally, though I think it's worked out well because you love a whiskey called Lecheg.
Yeah.
And Harmony does too, but like Evan really loves Lecheg.
Yeah, I'm not a religious man, but this is where I almost go evangelical sometimes, where I like to try and pass on my feelings of about Lecheg to others, and often it doesn't go so well, especially with my cohorts on the whiskey side, except for Harmony, who was already in the church, and I didn't have to go out and find her. But
she's your fellow evangelist, I think is what
that's right. That's right. But Tobermory is a really interesting distillery on the Isle of Mull. It's been around for a long, long time. It does a peated whiskey called Lecheg, which we have not bottled yet for a KWM cask, and I'm hoping that we can rectify that sometime in the next few years.
2023.
There we go. That's something that it's a resolution at this point for Harmony and I. But it tends to have this really weird phenolic, almost chemical note to it, where a lot of the whiskey that is bottled under the name Lecheg, especially when it's in sherry casks, tends to smell like a tire fire, to put it nicely, where it's funky, it's rubbery, and it's full of smoke and peat, but there is this very, very rubbery undertone that it takes along with it, and it is something that truly you have to experience for yourself and decide if you love it. Some people never get there, just like some people never get there with peated whiskey, but it's one style that's near and dear to my heart, just because every Lecheg and every Tobermory is like the roll of the dice, where you never know what you're exactly going to get until you taste it.
So I didn't hold the bottle up yet, and that's Evan's trigger to put this up on the screen if he's not done it already. But yeah, this is not Lecheg. But the reason that I started off talking about Lecheg is I think when this bottle arrived, I was like, no, this can't be. Because not only did we sample this whiskey, choose it from sample, but we actually asked for a second sample of it because the first time we tasted it, the nose and palate didn't match up. I think if I remember correctly, we were all in love with the nose. We're like, this is incredible. And then the palate's like, it was like there was bottle contamination, like something was wrong with the sample bottle. So God bless the folks at Berry Brothers, who again have also been good partners of ours for a long time. London-based wine merchants, but also in the whiskey industry, because they sent us another sample. Though it may have been, they did send us another sample. We picked the cask. We were happy with it. Again, this is another whiskey that took like a year to get to the shop. But when it arrived and I poured the first glass to nose it, I'm like, oh my God, is this Lecheg? Like, did we just get a Lecheg by accident? And like,
You wish.
500 bottles of it at 64.8%.
Yeah, so one thing to note that when we pick casks, a lot of the time, like it first comes down to how much we enjoy it or not, and if we think the quality is there, that's going to be the main part of the selection process. Another part of the selection process, of course, since we're a business, has to be how much is it going to cost and how much are we going to sell it for, and those have to line up to the point where we're comfortable and happy to sell it to customers where we don't feel like we're ripping anybody off, and also we want to talk about it because we feel that like the quality is there and you can't get anything else like it. When you get a ex-bourbon barrel, that's a 200-liter barrel when it was filled, and usually that evaporates over the time, so you're getting less and less bottles in the cask. When you get a sherry butt, that is about 500 liters in size, and it's a bit more of an investment, both in money and also time to sell that cask. So it's definitely a bit more of a gamble with a sherry butt, but it's not often you can get something at 64.8% at the same time that is so drinkable.
And those Lechegi notes seem to burn off. Like
they do.
It's the tire fire is gone. The blue cheese smeared into the rubber hockey room dressing room floor has dissipated, and now we're getting into like classic dried fruits, figs, dates, raisins, prunes, nutty tones, leather and chocolate.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, don't worry, Lecheg lovers. Like, even those notes are gone, it's still a really good whiskey. This is full on big sherry, and it gives you both sides of sherry so well, where it's dried fruits, it's fruit leather, but it's got the leather and tobacco note itself. It goes a little bit savory, but is just absolutely clean at the same time.
Harmony?
Yeah, I love this one, and I love the dark fruit notes. I love the cooked raisin and the kind of leather, dirty books and libraries and leather elbow pads on your jacket. And it's a scotch, you just want to sit and drink scotch and chat with your friends and just enjoy the nose and just enjoy tasting it. It is a lot stronger in ABV than the rest of the whiskeys we've had tonight, but the finish, it doesn't burn. It's warm and it's spicy, but it's not overpowering. You still get those dark fruit notes that come through, and your mouth salivates, and you just want to dive back in and have another sip.
Yeah. Andrew.
It's incredible how drinkable this is at 64.8%. I think of all the whiskeys in tonight's lineup, this one takes water the best, because it is not far off from jet fuel in terms of strength here, but becomes really chocolatey, both citrus and dried fruits and nutty tones on the palate, and it softens out. It's still got that leather tobacco element, but it softens out. It settles down into a nice little rhythm. That is without question to me the most the whiskey that I think improves the most with the addition of water in tonight's lineup. I really think it shows quite well.
Yeah, it is actually surprising that it does so well. I mean, partially unsurprising because of the 64.8, but again, it's that sherry factor where you never know what you're going to get when you add water to it. But man, like this is, I think Harmony hit it on when she talked about how, like, essentially this is the scotchiest scotch that ever scotched, where it's just, it is the epitome of what it is. Like, it's massive sherry. You get those coastal notes, and it's so big that you almost don't know what to do with it. Where if it was peated, it would be in Octomore territory, but unpeated, big sherry, and again, so clean with those big nutty notes, those big fruit notes, that spiciness. It just goes together so well.
All right, guys, it's time to go back through. This is our speed round, where we're going to go back through the drams one more time, and then maybe leave people with a few words of wisdom at the end of it. So starting off, I'm going to start with Evan this time, because I think I started Harmony with you before. Starting off on the Bruichladdich. Evan, what do you get on the Bruichladdich now?
Oh man, it's just like Weetabix in milk right now that you heat it up. It's just so grain driven and fun with that lactic note as well. And it's just fresh. It's really nice stuff.
Harmony?
Yeah, to me, it's more like granola and yogurt. It's still like creamy and it's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's funny. I like it more now than I did before.
That kind of cheesy, funky, barnyardy, mixed with honey, and I think white orchard fruits and citrus fruits is kind of hitting all the right notes for me right now. So yeah, I'm loving that. What about whiskey number 2? And I'm getting mauled here at the moment by my little friend. So Harmony, back to the Clynelish, thoughts?
The nose hasn't changed too much. It's still really lovely. Less eraser, more oaky fruit.
Yeah, it's going into like a sweet caramelized onion note in a really cool manner for me, and a little bit of like in some mushroom soup there with that, like not a creamy mushroom soup, but a mushroom broth that's not creamy.
Yeah, I was thinking more like French onion soup with all that baked cheese on top, with some onion, but I thought I was going crazy, so I'm glad you said it.
I'm gonna go a little bit weird territory here, not surprisingly. I'm getting like an all beef wiener in a bun with like salt, what is it, the sour cream and onion Ruffles chips, like kind of crumpled along the side of it, with
that sounds great.
a little bit of like a Japanese mayo, like
where it's got the spicy mayo, where it's that orangey looking mayo with the spicy sauce in it.
I don't know. Now I feel like I just need to go to Costco and buy myself a 50-cent hot dog.
Yeah, that's right. And some sushi.
Or you could just go to Tubby Dog if that's still a thing, which I don't know if it is.
I don't think it is.
Yeah, sadly.
Well, next time you're in Vancouver, you can go to Japadog then, where you can get your hot dog the way you want it.
Or you can just go home, make a hot dog, and throw some Fruit Loops on it.
Yeah, there you go.
That's true. All right. Where are we at? Evan, Glenfarclas, back to the 21-year-old cask strength.
Yeah, it's just nosing it again, but this is this is just kind of classic 21 territory for Glenfarclas for me, where it's nicely amped up at 51.9 instead of the 43, and gets a little bit more robust structure wise because of it. But great dried fruit notes, does get into a little bit of applesauce territory as well. But just still lively at 21 years old in a really nice manner.
It's like a fruit salad if you put like a caramel drizzle on it.
Yeah,
and just like a little touch of oak, just like a little touch of age there. It's really nice.
Yeah, still it's all blueberry pie for me, and acai berries, and like that buttery pie crust, the like, I don't know how to describe it, but like that kind of bright slightly tart blueberry fruit. Delicious. All right, Harmony, your turn. Tomatin 2006.
Is it weird that I get like rhubarb?
I
Rhubarb
could
and
see that.
sugar.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Oh,
I really love it. You still get a lot of butteriness on this, like you're cooking down your fruits for like a pie or something like that. Cooking down some apples with some butter and cinnamon, and you
Yeah.
got some nice baking spices in there.
Yeah, brown
maybe
sugar
not
cooking down
too
with
much
there as well.
sugar yet,
Definitely.
though. 'Cause I
Yeah,
think you get
definitely.
the
Brown
rhubarb,
sugars.
but, like with just a bit of sugar, not over sugared.
Yeah, the nose right now is to kind of go along what you're saying, coffee crisp or Kit Kat bar right now on the nose for me.
So I'm
Nice.
going full jujubes, like
Mhm.
old school gas station jujubes. When you opened the bag, they were kind of a little bit greasy.
Yeah.
Fond memories of big road trips with my dad when I was a kid, where we would stop and consume Coca-Cola and jelly beans
Yeah.
and jujubes.
Whereas
So,
like I know you kids are like stuck in the back of the vehicle, but have some sugar.
here, I'm gonna get you wired up.
You'll get along. Share the
Yeah,
armrest.
yeah.
Suffice to say, my father never fully appreciated the effects of sugar on stuff. So
No, but I like it. It's like
Yeah.
I've always really liked this one. I don't this one feels underrated to me. I think we got so many
Mhm.
casks at once
Yeah.
that some just with the name alone get outshone from others. But this Tomatin cask I really like. I think I like it more than the last one. And I think it's unique that we get the French oak casks. We don't see a lot of it. I think it's they did a really nice job with this one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what you're talking about is true, where I think this does follow or partially suffer from being so soon after the previous Tomatin cask we had, which was definitely more on a different style versus this one. But this one has a very underrated style, and a style that you can't get like from a lot of whiskeys in a cool manner, where you get this dry spiciness, but this juiciness from the fruit notes at the same time.
except maybe from Compass Box Spice Tree at a lower ABV,
Very true. Very
which
true.
is a segue into the Kensington Wine Market blend. So I think, Evan, it's your turn to lead off on this one.
Yeah, that was very smooth. Yeah, like again, it just blows me away. Like I almost feel like this is the one that didn't change in the glass versus the rest, but it stays together so well with time. Like oxidize or a little bit of oxygen isn't gonna like completely flip the script on this one. It just kind of like becomes more of itself in a really cool manner. It softens up, but it's still got that big peat and that big smoke that is still so approachable because of everything else that it brings with it.
I get a little bit of like a smoked beef jerky or pepperoni
Mhm.
note on here. Like it's got that spicy meat note. And I know we said like meaty Mortlock, but this is what I'm talking about. This is what we're talking about when we say meaty, literally meaty.
So are we talking Slim Jims or Hot Rods?
I think it's a hot rod.
Right. Very
I
good.
could be wrong. I don't know what a Slim Jim is. I don't think I've had one.
I just
It
remember there
smells
was
more
like-
like Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yeah, like him yelling at the TV, like something Slim Jim.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know how
I
to
mean,
rec-
maybe it is a Slim Jim.
For me, what I think I love about this is, through blending, you can create styles that don't exist anymore. And to me, this is kind of reminiscent a little bit of like Brora,
Yeah.
Flows Distillery, because you've got that Clynelish profile mixed with the Teoninic, which is almost like, Kalila mixed with Teoninic, which is almost a little bit like you're getting the waxiness of Brora, but the clean smoke from Clynelish. And then layering in of the Ardbeg and the Mortlach, you're adding that little bit of meatiness to it, the bright citrus and sort of firmer smoke. This to me, like, nosing it, if someone just put this in front of me, I'd be like, is that Brora? Like, especially if it's Kurt. So if Kurt randomly showed up and shoved a glass of this in my face, I might be like, is that Brora?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Ardbeg. I get a little bit of like a salty, burnt brownie on this.
Mm.
Yeah. it
I'm
does
not,
go
I
into
moved on to
chocolate territory.
Tobermory, sorry.
Oh,
I didn't
sorry.
realize
Oh,
I took the wrong glass.
well, Harmony, that's a great segue because I actually got a little bit of that too. My in-laws the other night made brownies slightly burnt
Okay.
with salted caramel icing on them, and
Ah.
I can actually see exactly where you're going with that one. And this is yours to lead us off. So Harmony, what else are you getting on this Tobermory?
Well, now you just brought me back to Mexico when I did a barbecue cook-off when we were down there. And first thing we had to do was make our dessert. And we did a smoky slow cooker chocolate brownie. And everybody covered theirs with some sort of nut and
Mhm.
marshmallows. And we decided no nuts, no marshmallows, just a nice thick crack of salt and pepper on top of our brownie.
Nice.
And then put it in a slow cooker or sorry, like a smoker for about an hour. And this is what it reminds me of. So barbecued foods and brownies.
Yeah. Yeah, it does have like a bacon meets brownie thing going on for me right now in a cool matter, and almost going into mole sauce. Yeah. It's so that's how you nose it if you're not used to whiskey. I don't know if you can see Andrew's dog there, but
Probably
used
not.
to it.
'Cause I
Gotta bring it
wasn't
in
talking,
slow.
but Walter is rejecting the Tobermory. It's a little too rich for him. He's only 5 months old.
yeah, baby steps, buddy.
Baby
And
steps.
he's barely 18 weeks,
Yeah,
let
that's right.
alone old enough to drink.
Yeah. That's like 17 in dog years, right? So he's almost there, but not quite yet.
Exactly. Very beefy on the nose for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, lots of like barbecue brisket, beef jerky, like teriyaki beef jerky.
Yeah.
I get a little cilantro, little
Mhm.
green vegetative note on the finish for me.
Yeah,
But
it's probably because he said Mexico, but now I'm thinking mole sauce.
I know it's probably because I'm thinking about the pulled pork tacos I made and how we had to like brine our green vegetables and our cilantro sauce. And
Mhm.
it's a terrible trip, Andrew. If you need someone to do it again, I guess I'll go.
We'll figure something out for sure. Well, this is a cool range of whiskeys.
Very
Obviously,
cool.
we can't teach you everything in one night, but we can at least lead you through an interesting range of whiskeys, hopefully entertain you a little bit along the way. And if you do have questions, please pop into Kensington Wine Market. You can talk to Harmony, Kurt, Evan, Sean, Sammy, Marty. I mean, we could go on. There's lots of people there who'd love to talk whiskey to you. And you can also reach us through our social media feeds, Instagram, maybe not so much Twitter because no one's really monitoring it, especially post Elon, and Facebook. And we're on TikTok now, which I still don't know how to use, but I'm going to learn at some point here. Parting words of wisdom. Evan, anything you want to say before we wrap this one up?
Yeah. Look forward to a Lecheg in 2023.
All right, we're gonna that's gonna take some effort, but I'm open. Harmony?
Drink less, drink better by KWM Casks.
There you go.
I like it. That's great. I don't think I can top that. We do have in-store tastings coming up, virtual tastings coming up that'll be on the website soon. So keep posted for that. Sign up for the newsletter if you want to be informed as soon as those things drop. But thanks for taking part in this virtual tasting. Hope you enjoyed it. We may do others, so watch this space. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Cheers.